Good evening, and welcome to the January 2023 edition of For the Love of Words. I'm your co-host, John Holgerson, and with me is Priscilla Almquist-Olsen. For the Love of Words has two components, poetry and music. Tonight, we start with poetry. With us at the table is Alice Kociemba. Alice is a poet from West Falmouth. She is the current chair of the Falmouth Cultural Council. She is co-editor of the book From the Farther Shore, Discovering Cape Cod and the Islands Through Poetry. She's also the author of Born Bridge, a collection of poetry that she published in 2016. She is the founding director of Calliope Poetry for Community and was guest editor of Common Threads, the poetry discussion project of Mass Poetry. For more than 10 years, Alice facilitated a monthly poetry discussion group at the Falmouth Public Library. She is the first poet to receive a literacy award from the Cape Cod Council of the International Reading Association for promoting literacy through poetry. Calliope's current project is Wish You Were Here, Postcards from the Past, a multidisciplinary artistic response to Falmouth Public Library's historical postcard collection. As a ceramic artist, Alice is the co-owner of Village Artists Collaborative in North Falmouth. She lives in North Falmouth with her husband, the poet Richard Humans. Welcome, Alice.
Thank you so much.
The one thing that is not in your biographical introduction is the fact that you are, and we will discuss this later this evening, you are one of the Commonwealth's staunchest advocates for the sustaining of poetry and the arts. And I think that's definitely something that should be added to your bio. Can you tell us a little bit about the most recent book, From the Farther Shore?
I'd be glad to. And again, it's so good to be back. I was here, 10 years ago
Something
almost?
like that, yes.
And it's wonderful to be live for you here the first time since the pandemic. From the Farther Shore, Discovering Cape Cod and the Islands Through Poetry was a project that Rich Humans, my husband, had inaugurated because he had done this on the Jersey Shore. And it's really a way to celebrate place, history, heritage, and culture through poetry. So the book starts with a poem by Stanley Kunitz, Route 6. I'm sure your viewers will know that. And then it ends with a poem by Mary Oliver, Coming Home. And in the middle is nationally regarded poets like Mark Doty or Brendan Galvin, and then some of our local poets that we worked really closely with. And each section picks up what is really iconic about the town or the region. For example, the Sandwich Glass Works is the poem set in Sandwich, which I think people would know.
Now, you had two other editors on this book because there were 84 poets all told, correct?
Yes.
So I assume each editor, co-editor, had a certain number of poets to work with?
Well, we did it a little differently. We put out a national call, and we got over 1,000 submissions. So calling that back to 84 poets and over 100 poems. The third editor is Robin Smith Johnson, who's a native Cape Codder. She's also a research librarian for the Cape Cod Times. She was, and now she teaches at the community college. And she did the historical notes in the back. So anybody could pick up the book and then refer back to something historical that makes the poem even come more alive because of the context. So the three of us really worked together to sort of figure out what poems should be in, and some of it was tough when you know people very personally. Right. And then Rich also went to get the permissions from the poets like Linda Pastan or Mary Oliver's estate, so that we certainly could publish the book.
What were your criteria that you used in determining such a difficult task, 1,000 submissions?
Well, we had, Rich and I had sat down and we had made a list. And I'll give you an example of what we didn't find. we actually thought of the Cape Cod Railroad or Cape Cod Baseball League. So we made a list of, what makes Provincetown the arts colony that it was. What about that? What about the fishing community? And we just made this extensive list. And so we could look for things that brought the place alive and that seemed like it would appeal to the general reader.
Now, the book is currently available, correct?
Yes, it's available through any independent bookstore. It is also available on Amazon if you choose that route.
Choose that route, yeah.
And we made it a point to make sure it was in every library on the Cape and Islands because we wanted, and this is a story, we initially went to the Provincetown Public Library, which has a great poetry selection, and we found a poem about the Marconi Station in Wellfleet by finding a book by Stephen Bauer, who lives in Vermont. And I thought, wouldn't it be sort of neat 100 years from now that somebody finds our book and says, oh, that's what the Cape was like. So it's like a snapshot of what this place means to so many people, both the residents and the tourists, and people. We had a submission from Hawaii, an art history professor who wrote about Edward Hopper. So we knew what we were looking for, and that was a big help.
Now, in the introduction, I mentioned about postcards from the past. Can you tell us a little bit about what that project entails?
Well, this was one of those things. Be careful what you ask for because you might get it. I wrote a grant, and I saw when you walk into the Falmouth Public Library, there's a scroll of these beautiful vintage postcards, and they look like art. And I thought, oh, since I have an interest in writing to other art, wouldn't it be neat if we took the postcards and we did new writing, either prose poems or brief poems, and we asked people to take a photograph, because everybody has an iPhone and everybody's taking photographs, so you can look at the then and the now. And again, it's going to celebrate what makes Falmouth, Falmouth.
And that's coming out, that project you think might be completed by?
Well, the first readings is with a Boston poet who has written a book of postcard poems. So that'll be April 1st in the afternoon at the Falmouth Public Library. Her name is Jennifer Rose. And then David Surratt and Robin Smith Johnson will do workshops at the library of writing new work. And Kathleen Casey and Mark Chester will be the photographer curators who will help select the photographs. And then we'll have an exhibit at the Museum on the Green for the Falmouth Historical Society. So it's literature and history and art, and it should be just a celebration of the place.
And it's also a point of archival history
Yes.
that you're giving to the library and to future generations.
And one of the things we found, Rich and I went there one afternoon, and we looked at some of the postcards. There's thousands of them, but we looked at maybe 200. And what I didn't realize, some of the postcards are from the 1920s with the Model T Ford. And there's one that they were able to auto from Falmouth to Woods Hole, which is a village of Falmouth, because of the automobile. So it's also a love affair with, things that we now take for granted, which we shouldn't have. When you think about it, the automobile really connected us.
Now, because we only have a short interview period, I do not want to let this pass. As I said, what you need to include in your bio is your advocacy for the arts and for poetry. And within the last few months, and culminating in a meeting at the Falmouth Board of Selectmen just a week or so ago, you had to stand up and advocate for a part of the Falmouth budget that had been approved by the town meeting, by the people at the town meeting a few months before. But then you got a call from one of the Board of Selectmen. Was it the chairman who called you from the Falmouth Board of Selectmen?
Well,
Exactly a month ago today, I believe, December the 19th.
oh, that was the acting town manager who called to say that he was not going to put a line item in a town budget makes funding for the arts permanent. So it was a modest amount, $10,000. And he basically said, but there are other priorities, and I've had to say no to other departments, so I have to say no to you. And I said, well, since I don't take no for an answer about advocacy for the arts. I said, well, what's the next step? And there would be a way to speak to the select board and really say, it's time to really say that the arts are part of the town, and it's not an add-on or a fluff. It's just as important as Falmouth Human Services, mental health, because there's a high crossover. People who do art therapy, for example, for certain populations, they get our grants, and we also pull in tourist dollars, so we're good for the economy. And it took a how do I say it? It wasn't a hard sell. It was a heartfelt appeal to really say it is really time now to give to the artists full funding for their grants. I really appealed to them to be part of the team, to really, 2 months ago in November, there was tremendous support for this one-time allocation of $10,000. And people, there was one person in particular, we asked for $7,300, and somebody said, if you're able to fund a study for artificial turf, you should give these good people $10,000 for the arts. And I thought, if you really can't listen to that message, then we have to go back to town meeting. It's a long meeting with the budget. And why would you want to put everybody?
It's in April, right?
It's in April.
So it's a delay of several months.
Yes.
Yes.
And it also means that we were finally able to do what we wanted, which was to fully fund most of those grants. So people didn't have to cut back on their programming, or something that was free, they would have to charge money so the organization could survive. And the arts have been through a really tough time.
It's just sort of a drop in the bucket, but it's a drop that you need.
Yes.
And so you weren't asking for something outlandish. And
Not yet.
not yet.
I hope nobody on the Falmouth Select Board is watching this, because if they have, they're on alert now. But I think it's very important to point that out, because it's not just all these years that you have worked as an artist, as a poet, and sustaining others who show up to read at Calliope. But it's also you standing up and asking, and really, in a sense, demanding that where you live, the community where you live, recognize the importance of arts to the lifeblood of that community. And it certainly is true, not just in Falmouth or West Falmouth, but it's also true in many other communities in the Commonwealth. But I think in anybody in your position who stands up and advocates for that should be acknowledged, because that's a hard fight. Even though you like to place it in very diplomatic terms, I'm very much aware of what a hard fight that can be.
Alice, do you have a cultural district in your community?
No, I think there was one that wasn't funded, so that's sort of next on my agenda, is to say, okay, how would it be possible? It's other towns, Sandwich has one called Glasstown. There are other places on the Cape, but I think it's time that we all push to be more progressive and inclusive. And I do think that there's a way to bring the arts into Main Street.
Now, in Easton here, we have not only a cultural district, statewide cultural district, but we also have a local, well, both cultural districts are local. I'm on the board of the Easton Shoaltown Cultural District.
Yes.
And so we are able to apply for grants similarly to the other cultural district in town. And I would suggest that would be very helpful to Falmouth.
Tonight, Alice, you're going to read from the Father Shore or from your Bourne Bridge?
I'm actually going to mostly read new poems.
Oh, excellent.
And I'm going to, which is what was so kind about this invitation, it got me to look in my new poems and make some edits. I will read one new poem in the book, and I'll end with the poem that is closest to my heart, which I won't tell you which that is.
Okay, that's
But
fine.
the first 2 words of my reading is thank you, and the last 2 words of my reading will be thank you. So for both of you you for inviting
You're
me.
very welcome. Thank you very
Thank
much for accepting the invitation to be here tonight. We look forward to hearing you read.
The priest's blessing, the bells tolling. Everyone with breath sang to ward off the dark. And this next poem has a epigraph, which I will read, and then I'll read the title. On February 14th, 2018, 17 people were killed and 17 wounded at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Nicholas Cruz fired over 150 bullets in 6 minutes from his legally owned AR-15 semi-automatic rifle. Cruz had threatened his mother and brother with this same gun. The day before the shooting, Cruz flooded a girl with texts, phone calls, and photos of old scars from where he had cut himself, pleading for her to be his Valentine. And the source is the Miami Herald. Red flags. He's the quiet guy in math, the one who's bullied on the bus, the one whose mom just died, the one with many guns. Pop, 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 pop. This is not a drill. He's the guy who just got dumped, the one they just kicked out, who kills lizards just for fun, the one with many guns. Pop, pop, pop. This is not a joke. He's the guy who couldn't cry, who slit his wrists when demons raged, who cut off dead squirrels' tails, the one with many guns. Pop, pop. This is not my life. Sulfur sours the air, sirens shrill and screams. I look him in the eye, the one with just this gun. Pop. This is not my blood. That poem really meant the world to me, or means the world to me, when I worked in an emergency room as a psychiatric social worker, trying to get guns out of the hands of people who were vulnerable and needed help, and trying to get them the help was hard. But the thing I came away with is it is about the guns. It is also about mental health services. But until we deal with the guns, there will be way more deaths than there should be. This is a poem that responds to Szymborska's poem, Photograph 9/11. There is no last line in her poem, and there's no last line in this one. Shanksville, population 236 on 9/11. While the men were milking, while the bread was baking, while the children dawdled, while the school bell rang, the plane was flying, while the moms made coffee and the dads ate breakfast. When the plane was falling, the husband texts, "I love you." And I wrote this poem, actually, can I just take a second? Okay. I wrote this poem on the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And it also has an epigraph from the Old Testament, the book of Jeremiah. Is there no balm in Gilead, no physician there? Why grows no new flesh over the wound of my people? And the title is Sepsis. Deep and old, it burns. No bandage sticks, it bleeds. No scab forms, it oozes. We ignore it, it festers. We cauterize it, it won't heal. A red line travels to the heart. It needs a doctor. There is no doctor. And this year, in November, we're coming up to the 60th anniversary of the assassination of JFK. Hearing the news, I still see her, feet up on the ottoman after a long shift in the ER, hands reddened from all the washing up and all the washing up at home. The flash of her crochet hook, quick as a minnow in the shallows at Rocky Nook. A handmade sweater for each grandchild. 1 year, 9 tennis sweaters, 9 fisherman knits the next. Waste not, want not. She saves every scrap for granny squares. Each grandkid sent off with an Afghan in college colors. She never talks about escaping the Merrimack Valley mills. At 18, made her own way by train to Jamaica Plain. Never talks about nurses' training, all the gory details, except once, during As the World Turns, Walter Cronkite interrupts with the news, takes his glasses off, and she knows right away. Brains look like cooked macaroni. Then her hands stilled. In 3 days, glued to the Motorola, she finishes enough squares in the colors of a flag. I'm going to change it up a little bit and read another thank you poem, just because what you remember saves you, and sometimes what you have to remember is all the little things to be grateful for. Thank you for this splatter of sunlight after weeks of gray, and how it illuminates more than these French tulips spilling over a blue vase, and for the failure of a late March nor'easter to dump another foot of snow, and for these pines, steadfast in a tumultuous wind, like our politicians are supposed to be, and for this nuthatch at the feeder, eating as if practicing yoga, and for just this, ginger peach tea in this misshapen mug that wobbles but holds steady and does what it is supposed to do. Just to pick up on the theme of birds, just before dark. The cardinals are my vespers. Slow down, they say. Take care. They take turns at the feeder. He, on a low branch, watches, waits. She eats each sunflower heart slowly. After each swallow, she turns toward him, as if nothing can be taken for granted, as if everything is sacred. The light dims, day merges with night. Now it is his time to feast on what remains. Each seed is savored. There is enough. He turns his brilliant head, his crown flat. He is calm. He is safe. She is there. He takes the last seed and is off to her on the branch nearest my window. Beak to beak he opens. She receives. This is more than mating. It is almost. Amen. And just because I'm in a series called For the Love of Words, I'm going to read my own tribute to words and to the dictionary. Words have their own stories. After school, she takes the Oxford English Dictionary off its stand, settles into the library's window seat, takes her glasses off, puts her chin close to the page. She'll be quizzed tomorrow. Today's word is passage. She puts her finger and stops at pass. From the old French passé to the vulgar Latin passare to the Latin passus, to step, to set a pace, to go away, to depart, to die,
as in pass on. Use it in a sentence. Your father passed last night, unexpected. In fading light, she senses him hovering outside the window like a butterfly that floats, then stills before it disappears. And the next poem I'm writing is to a painting by Salvador Daldao, and it's in the book that we've been talking about, From the Father's Shore, and it's written in a form called a pantoum, which is a form that's particularly useful to use when you're writing about obsessions or grief. Homage to the Patricia Marie, after the painting by Salvador Daldao. All 7 crew missing, all presumed dead. The boy in blue stares wide-eyed away from the headline, his dead mother's name. Come home smelling like money, she'd have said. Dead, the Captain Billy found blue and wide-eyed, clinging to a buoy 3 miles off Nauset. Come home smelling like money, she'd have said, dreaming of scallops piled high in the hole. Still clinging, that's Billy, son and grandson of captains, his boat named after his young first wife. This trip, the scallops filled the hole like a dream, before a freaker swept them all into the deep. Along with the boat, a second death for his wife. We choose the life, and the life chooses us. That freaker took their dragger into the deep, leaving only debris and the crew to wash up. They chose the life, and the life took theirs. Dickie and Buddy never were found. Just debris and 5 bodies came home that winter. Billy, Bobby, Walter, Ernest, Mott. Dickie and Buddy lost forever in Polyp's Rip, where the sea gets real sloppy. Billy, Bobby, Walter, Mott. I think we found your husband. This key fits your lock. In Polyp's Rip, the sea gets real sloppy. On the wharf, a fisherman reads from the paper. They only knew it was Ernest when his key fit her lock. The men listen, hand to shoulder, shells and empty blue. The fisherman reads on, the paper now shaking. All 7 crew missing, all presumed dead. The men listen, hand to shoulder, as empty blue eyes look away from the headline, his dead mother's name. And one of the pleasures of doing this book was having the time really to go to the Historical Society's archives in Provincetown and also reading old editions of the Provincetown Banner where you could get the details. Some of those details are from the fishermen themselves who survived, who were are part of the Provincetown fishing community. So I wouldn't know anything about Polyp's Rip, where the sea gets real sloppy, or what a freaker is, but doing research does help make the poem come to life. So this is the last poem of tonight, and I always say if you have to be remembered for one poem, this would be the one I'd want to be remembered for. Death of T-Ticket Hardware. I never knew his name, nor he mine. He was always there, patient, polite, shy. I never knew the name of what I needed either, but he did after listening. You know that thingamajig that connects the hose to the washer? I need the innards of a lamp. He'd find it in a flash through overcrowded aisles so narrow only a munchkin could maneuver. In the back of the store on the dusty top shelf where whatsits live. He'd tell me how to use it, and he'd tell me again, drawing it on the little scratch pad he kept at the register, not the electric kind, next to the dish of pennies and the bowl of lollipops. I would always leave with a red one and confidence. He was the kindest man in town. I imagined he went home at 5:30 every night to the apartment above the store and told his wife over meatloaf and mashed potatoes, green beans and pecan pie. That lady came in again today. Seems bright enough, but doesn't even know a lamp has a socket. And he'd smile when she would say, "Oh, Mrs. Dimwit." And they would turn on the news at 6. The drive to town is eerie now that T-Ticket Hardware is gone. Boarded up windows stare like a zombie whose soul's been stolen by Walmart. Peter Cabral, son of John, son of Peter, son of John, I never said hello or goodbye or thank you. Thank you.
Welcome back to the second portion of For the Love of Words with the musician Shane Muir. Shane is a soloist this evening, but he's also part of a band called Galir. Shane, can you tell our audience a little bit about your background?
Sure, yeah. So I grew up playing music basically most of my life. Since I was 6 years old, I started playing piano. And, from there I learned guitar and drums and bass. And it kind of just eventually, it took a while for me to get to where I was in forming Galir as like a project. It started as a solo project, but I never really wrote music until around like 2017, 2018. I always had this sort of self-doubt that like when I would write lyrics, it was especially lyrics, it's like I don't like how these sound, and I don't know, I guess just big life changes and events kind of pushed me to realize that I can write about anything and not really care what people think.
How old were you in 2018?
So I'm 25 now.
You were 18. No, sorry.
No, I would have.
No, I'm
20. I would have been 20 years old. Time has flown by so fast. It's crazy.
Now, what kind of music do you write?
I pull inspiration from a lot of different genres. A lot of what I post on the internet about myself kind of pulls me in the category of like indie singer-songwriter with some influence from more modern like emo and rock music.
Right, on Spotify and also on Soundboard and Bandcamp, they list your music as indie/emo, EMO.
Yep.
So perhaps could you tell our audience who may not be familiar with that kind of music exactly what is emo music?
So it's interesting because the definition of emo has kind of evolved since, I know just growing up as a kid, if someone said emo, sort of, I guess the stigma is that emo musicians and fans were wear all black, piercings and all that kind of stuff, which is true to a degree. Ever since I'd say about like early 2010s, it started kind of evolving into it's less about the look and more about the content, and the sort of the content of emo music is emotional in nature. What I've seen over the years is emo music is very like raw and a lot of songs you hear on the radio, a lot of music is sad, but it's almost kind of masked with like how it sounds. It sounds happy, but the lyrics are about like heartbreak, say. Emo music kind of ditches that societal norm, I guess, and it's raw, it's raw, it's a sad song, and it's okay, because it's okay to be sad. It also, I guess, evolved with how mental health as like a topic is evolving just like in our everyday life. More people are talking about it, not only like in music, but in the news and other, popular media. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge what it was, but also acknowledge how it's evolved over the years. So for me, when I say I'm an emo artist, I'm emo in that I guess I draw some musical influence from emo bands and how it sounds, but also just the idea of me being vulnerable, I guess, to my audience, I think is super important, and that's kind of like the staple of emo in the modern age.
Well, the name emo, EMO, is shortened for emotional, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
And emo music has its early roots back in the 80s in punk rock.
Yep.
So you've evolved, obviously, from your music, your emo music has evolved, obviously, from that hard sound from the 80s.
Right.
Is your music rather sad?
I consider my music very sad, and I think it's interesting too, like talking with people that are older than me, like my mom especially is like, why are all your songs so sad? And I was like, well, it's a good outlet for me, and I think it's a good outlet for a lot of musicians to write about being sad. Variety of topics, but musical inspiration for me will always come in a time of need, when I am feeling rather, hopeless, or just kind of like not where I'd like to be. I write music and I feel better about it. I've written happy songs too, but I do think that it's great for me to be able to be vulnerable and, like I said earlier, not really care what people think.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, but you're also expressing your deepest emotions, and you're reflecting on how you feel at any given moment. So, and that's very true of Joni Mitchell, for example. I mean, she wrote the song about James Taylor.
Right, yeah.
And
I mean, it dates back, even
Sure.
farther than that, and like all the music you hear on the radio today, not all of it's sad, but there are some undertones in lyrics that can be sugar-coated in some ways. I mean, some of the biggest, Billboard singles or just like songs that are cemented in history, some of the greatest of all time, are sad love songs.
Yeah.
I've written sad love songs. I've written songs about loss, whether that be a loss of like someone who passed away, or the loss of a loved one in a relationship, or it's all just about kind of bringing down your defenses and letting yourself be heard. And I've been praised a lot for that. Like my very first record that I made in 2018, it was titled Until. I was so nervous to put it out because I'd never done anything like that. And for me to put it out and receive the support that I did from so many of my friends, so many new people that I didn't know, was very rewarding, and it was nice to be heard by others and for them to say, I relate to this. That is such a huge thing to me, is having someone relate to my art.
Where did you put it out?
I put it out everywhere, Spotify, Apple Music. I use a program on the internet that kind of distributes it across everywhere you can hear music.
SoundCloud?
Yep. It's on YouTube. It's on Bandcamp. Probably Amazon Music.
Okay.
It's everywhere you could think of. And
Okay.
yeah.
Well, you're talking really, or expressing yourself about the human condition, which hasn't changed over millennia.
No.
Okay. So, but how much feedback do you get, since you're exposing your music and yourself in so many different venues?
I mean, when I first released the music, it definitely, like, when I first put it out and received the initial kind of wave of people listening to it is really when I hear it the most. But I'll give a good example. I really haven't put out any new music in almost 3 years, and occasionally I'll still have people just message me on social media or something, and they'll be like, I still love this song, like this is, or I just discovered you. I can see like my Spotify stats about demographics, different demographics of people, what countries it's being listened to in. And I remember actually seeing the other day, someone in Estonia was listening to my music, which is interesting because Galir is an Estonian term for galley. And that's, you asked me earlier before we started this, like where the name came from. The name originally was just kind of a nickname that had stemmed from, me and my friends would have silly nicknames for each other, and they would kind of evolve over time, and it eventually became Galir. I couldn't tell you what it started with. But then I decided to Google Galir one day just to see if it was a word, and it turns out it's an Estonian word for galley. So,
Now, the music of Galir also can be found on those same websites, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, Spotify.
Yep. And
That is so wonderful when you think about the ability to advertise your music. You're magnifying your art.
I'm trying my best,
I
just
mean,
to have it be seen by as many people.
But I think the media that we have today helps you do that. I mean, think about how difficult it was 50 years ago.
Right.
Tonight, you're going to be doing all original material
Yep, it's
that
all
hasn't been recorded on any of those venues.
correct. Yeah, it's all original. I've been kind of hunkering down and writing. More the last month or so has just been the bulk of my writing after years of nothing. But yeah, it's all new material, and it's all unreleased, so you can't listen to it anywhere.
Well, we look forward to listening to it now.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, it's an
Yes.
honor.
Thank you.
My name's Shane, otherwise known as Galir, and this first song is called Afterthought. Please don't forget me when you go into great things. The last thing that I want is to be an afterthought. Trust me, I know time does not move slow. If you leave, I'll go, as long as you keep me in tow. Keep me in tow. Keep me in tow. Did you see that? Should I just? Okay, cool. This next one is called Income and Assets. Boxes for miles, piles as far as the eye can see. Unfortunately for me, the future I see looks bleak. Is a number all that I'm reduced to be? I thought my plan was clear, but it appears that setbacks won't stop setting me back and dreams disappear. Can't pull myself out. I finally understand the truth that I'd probably be lost without you. Need that pressure though. I'll just continue to coast. Today was fine, I guess was the best. Struggling to get by with all of the weight on my chest. Unfortunately for you, an anxious mess is what you'll come home to. What am I doing wrong? Make a list of all the things you thought you missed until they all came back around and made you feel the opposite. Focus makes sense, the ones you love at your dispense. Tell me, do you want to be remembered? I can't speak my mind without feeling like a burden, but I'd probably be lost without you. I just need to let go. But I'll continue to coast.
This next one doesn't even have a title. So we are going to call this one Untitled.
Lovely to see you. It's been quite some time. Would you like to reconnect and pick up where we left off? How foolish do you think I am? Putting up with your nonsense was not part of the plan. You have plenty of people to fall back on. Learn how to let go before you ruin someone. You're hurting those you trust in you, and you're making their lives impossible. So back off steadily before you open another wound. Before you ruin someone. Before you ruin someone. Before you use people to your own advantage. You use me to your own advantage.
Thank you. This next one is called November 4th, and it's one that's very near and dear to my heart. It goes a little something like this.
Well, am I wrong for dwelling on the fact that you're still gone? Letters I write won't get to you when I feel lost. Oh, so lost. Will I feel lost? Oh, so lost. Well, am I sane? Writing all my secrets and feelings to keep a straight